Hope everybody is doing well. It's time for another online dinner party here on Pod TV. And of course, we've got amazing guests as always. Hope that everybody is doing well. I know that yesterday we had torrential rains hit in here in Durham, North Carolina. I heard there were some tornadoes and other things that hit in parts of North Carolina. Fortunately, we didn't get that, even though I did hear from one of my cohorts here in Pod TV that they had family members that were being flooded. So there was definitely some heavy rain and all along those lines. And there might be the possibility of some more heavy rains on Friday and over the weekend and all along that kind of way. But we'll see if that happens or doesn't happen. I know I stepped outside earlier and it was actually a lovely day. It was definitely very clear, a little bit on the chilly side, but not overly chilly. And it was definitely some good weather to be out and seeing people and just going out for a brief walk. I need to get out and about more often. But of course, there are a number of things going on in Pod TV that keep me busy as well. So definitely was following that. And of course, we had World Edition earlier where we were talking some world politics and talking about a relief effort that was actually going on because there was a organization that was doing relief in Israel, in the Ukraine, in other parts of the world as well. So we had some guests on sharing about their organization and what they were doing in that space. And of course, we had Modern Investment earlier, and there have been a number of other shows that have been aired here on Pod TV. And of course, we've got the Pod TV bookstore as well that actually oftentimes features some of the authors that are from this particular show as well as other shows. So if authors have got booked, we often try to give them some sales as well. So that was going on earlier also. And it's always good to have amazing guests and folks that are in the space of a lot of different conversations. And I'm going to bring on a couple of them for the dinner party. I know Michael was here first, and he's actually a fellow North Carolinian. Got some ladies that'll be joining us as well and everything. But Michael, glad that you are able to be here. And I know that you were actually talking about this notion of there was astronaut training in North Carolina, and you wrote a children's book about that and wrote a number of other things also. But definitely you're in that leadership space and all along those lines. But if you want to share about that book as well as a new book that I think will be released next week. So there's a new book that you've actually got there called In Kind and all in that kind of way. So definitely just share a little bit about your own North Carolina journey and your thoughts around the book that you've got and the book that you wrote that was a children's book.
Oh, well, Mark, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. This is always so much fun to chat with you and hear your thoughts on current events and all of that. So, yeah, I first moved here when I was 13. I was born and raised just outside of Washington, D.C., and I've grown up here in North Carolina, went to middle school and high school in Durham, North Carolina,
Mhm.
and then went to UNC for my undergraduate degree. And then I kind of flitted around mostly up and down the East Coast. But eventually, I just found myself gravitationally just pulled back here to North Carolina because I mean, what's not to love about this great state, right?
Yep, it's a great state. And like you said, some folks like the state because we are a state that has beaches and mountains and definitely some varying weather. Sometimes the weather can get a little harsh, like I mentioned yesterday and everything. But for the most part, it is very mild weather, even mild winters and all along those lines. But every once in a while, those tornadoes and flash floods will rear their ugly head and everything. But that's not the norm. It's actually just something that happens on occasion, but we have gotten used to it. So that's just part of the North Carolina way of life.
That's right. If you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes, right?
Exactly. Wait 5 minutes, it'll change. And as friends of mine have said, if you want to have a change of pace, if you want to go to the mountains, and if you're in central North Carolina, it's only a few hours away. And if you want to go to the beaches, that's only a few hours away as well. So you can actually get to the beach, or you can also get to the mountains if that is what is of your interest and all along those lines. Tell me a little bit about In Kind, and then I'm gonna bring in some of our other guests, and we're just gonna have a casual conversation, and everything. But definitely tell me a little bit about what In Kind is all about, since you're the author of that book as well.
Sure thing. Yeah. In kind is the summation of a lot of experiences that I had just coming into different careers over the last 30 something years. I've been in 5 different career pathways and I've been in leadership positions in each of them. And I have just made all kinds of mistakes. And that's given me the great benefit of being able to look back and try to understand what could I have done better? How could I have sidestepped that? Are there better ways of interacting with people on a daily basis? And so that's where the seed of this book came from was, do I live my values? Do I believe, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Do I believe that for everyone or just for the people that it's kind of convenient for, right? Because you encounter that first person who's going to challenge you. Do you bend that rule? And what I found was that every single time I have, things have gone very badly. And every time I've tried to live my values and try to extend the hand of kindness, even when I don't agree with the other person, even when I think the other person's trying to cheat me or do something bad to me, the results have always been good. The results have always been, it's almost like a Jedi mind trick. If you can just be really kind to the other person, even when they're throwing unkindness at you, they don't know what to do with that. And so that's what the book is all about. It's how to be effective in work and in life by letting kindness be your compass.
Yeah, definitely. That is an important conversation. And I was going to bring in Genevieve King, who I know is in the education space and all along those lines. So I definitely wanted to hear a little bit about what you got going on, because one of the things that the network talks about is this belief, and it is belief of both of the founders of the network, Pod TV, Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun, that we're not doing enough to teach things that need to be taught, including some of those things that Michael would talk about, like values. And they would argue that we're not doing enough to teach about fiscal literacy and some of the other things. I've even heard some of them talk about civics are being taught in the school as well, and even some of the people that want to go into vocational fields as well. So Genevieve, if you could share a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on, and then we'll just go into this casual conversation. I've got other guests will be joining us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, so much for having me on. Nice to see you, Michael. Nice to meet. Yeah, my name's Genevieve. I am from the Flathead Reservation in Montana, and I'm an educator, longtime educator, 25 plus years of teaching children. And I've developed a nature-based, mindfulness-infused curriculum for the K-12 space. We have full year-round curriculum for pre-K through fifth grade through elementary, and then we have supplemental curriculum for middle school and high school for both classroom educators and homeschool families.
Well,
So
along
we
those
are
same lines, before I bring in some of the other guests, I know that when I don't have any kids of my own, but I've got two nephews, and when they were young, they're now about to be 15 and 16 in August of this year. So they're 14 and 15 right now and everything. But when they were very young, my dad was teaching them by showing them nature and showing them a number of other things. And some folks might have thought that that was too young to teach people about nature. I actually think that despite what some people say about when we begin to actually process what we're learning and everything, that we can teach people even at a very young age. I've even heard of people that are learning even when they are in the womb and all in that space. But I just wanted your thoughts around that, and whether we should even be teaching around nature. Because I mean, in this day and time, we're seeing a lot of people go toward mindfulness and having a better understanding of nature. There have even been some people that have argued that during the pandemic and 9/11, that which was some 20 odd years ago, that if you observe nature, nature had kind of like done a in one case, they did a duck, is what I called it, during 9/11, because I talked to a number of my friends that even remembered birds, and even birds that were around during New York, like pigeons and stuff. And when 9/11 took place, it was like they got a signal from the Most High or God or whatever force you want to call them and everything, that humans are about to act a little silly. Y'all might want to go into hiding and all along those lines. And then the opposite happened with COVID, because they knew we were inside. So a lot of cases of them being outside when we weren't used to them being outside, including in Italy and other places. But I just wanted your take on that as a nature advocate.
absolutely. Well, I think you can never be too young to become connected to nature. And I think children are innately connected to nature. They come out of the womb enthralled with nature, enchanted with nature. And, you know, as we grow and get older, and in this day and age, I mean, when I was a kid, you know, pre-internet, we were outside till the lights came on, and, you know, we'd had a very different childhood growing up. And nowadays, everybody's inside. You're on tablets, you know, technology, all those things. And now we're coming into a world of virtual reality and artificial intelligence, and you know, the digital world is becoming as real, if not more real, to a lot of kids than the actual world. And so I think it's really, really important to have a strong, strong connection to the planet, a strong connection to the earth. And you're right, you know, babies are learning in utero. They're learning from the moment they come out. And actually, there is the most prolific brain growth in a human being's life happens in the first 7 years of life. So there is a million neural connections per second happening in those early years. never again repeated. And so actually preschool teachers have more of an effect on the lasting input into a human being's life than even a college professor does. So it's a very, very crucial time for learning. Absolutely. And so it's the most important time to really instill values that are going to be important, not only for, social development, physical development, you can use the word spiritual development, but just, mental, the sense of self, mindfulness, being, knowing who I am in relation to the world. And that's when our default modes are set as children. It's where we learn to develop our sense of self, like who am I as a human being on this planet, like compared to everything else. And so it's a very important time to learn.
Yeah. Along those same lines, before I bring in some of the other guests and everything, what is your thoughts? Because you mentioned being a member of what some people would consider one of the First Nation people, and all along those lines. And there's always been this stereotype about what is being taught or not taught in the schools around the Native culture and all along those lines. And I do have some relatives that claim more of that side of their heritage, and we definitely acknowledge all sides of our heritage than they do the African American side. So, like my own family, we claim more of the African American side, but I do have some relatives that claim more of their Native roots and actually are participants in the powwows and a number of other things as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts around the Native pride and also just being involved in that Native culture, and whether our society in general is teaching enough about that versus the stereotypes that we get from the old Westerns that are still out there. You can find them in the reruns and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on that.
Yeah. Well, it's a big, big topic of conversation that could go on and on and on. There's a lot to it. I'm from the reservation, but I'm not enrolled with the tribe here. The reservation that I'm from is Flathead Reservation, and it's home of the Salish, Pend d'Oreille, and Kootenai tribes. It's a combination of non-enrolled members, enrolled members, non-tribal members. I'm a non-enrolled member. My background is very mixed, so I'm not enrolled with this tribe, but growing up here my whole life, I'm obviously immersed in this culture, and that's what has shaped who I am completely. My understandings, my views, my values, all of that. And I think that historically there's been a lack of respect given to original peoples all over the world. The fact of the matter is that colonialism has covered the entire planet, without getting into, it's become a very political conversation, unfortunately, rather than just plain facts. Human beings have colonized all over the planet. And in that, which some could say is, some would argue that that's just human nature, and that's how human beings work. But, there's been a lot of damage in the wake of that all over the planet. And so I'm a really strong believer that, indigenous cultures from all over the globe have inherently been living more in balance with their ecosystems than colonizers who have come from other places. No matter where they came from and where they colonized, there tends to be a disconnect to the land, a disconnect to, the soil and the culture and the people. And so I think it's really important to reconnect to the land, whether you're a tribal member, whether you're not a tribal member and you're somebody who is a transplant, or whether your family has been there for generations but came from, immigrated from somewhere else. I think it's really important to become connected to the land where you are, regardless of how long you've been there. And that's a way of showing respect and acknowledgement, whether you're a transplant or not. So I think that's a really important piece of sort of reconnecting and, rebalancing that disconnect that's happened over centuries and over time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. One of the things that I know has happened sometimes is, and it's been a conversation on this network and other shows, and even on this show as well, is this notion of generational wealth. And definitely we've seen a lot of young people that are not necessarily trying to maintain the land that their family inherited. I know that my mom and her sister, she just lost a sister not that long ago, a couple of years ago, and all in that space. But the land was then passed on to her sons and all in that space. And I'm pretty sure that the land, should my mom or others pass, would be passed on. So it's that generational connection of wanting to keep the land in the family and everything. So I'm wondering your thoughts around that, and whether that's something we need to do more of just in general, because I think that there have been a number of conversations around generational wealth.
Absolutely. And that's another really, really big topic. And I think, people of color from all over, which tend to be the people that are most often colonized, um, haven't had the opportunity to build generational wealth the way that other people have, historically from a structural standpoint. So anybody that has the opportunity, and is blessed with the opportunity to have land that they're able to call their own or that is passed down, even if it's not, even if you're living on land that you don't own, it's still, I think, super important to have that connection and that respect. And one of my very favorite books, if you haven't read it yet, I would encourage everybody to read it. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass. It's a beautiful, beautiful book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it talks about becoming indigenous to a place, and that anybody can become indigenous to a place by connecting to the land, having almost like conversation with the land, being in tune with the land. And I think that's a concept that's really important. But yeah, absolutely. If you are blessed enough to have, property in your care and your family's care, I think taking advantage of that in the way that you're able to, connect to it and have something that you can pass along is super, super important. As a parent myself, I have two daughters, and two grown daughters now. My youngest is going to be 21 in a few weeks. It's crazy. My oldest is 28 years old, and she actually had a baby this last summer. So I'm actually a grandma, which is super crazy. And thinking about, how that's changed my perspective of just everything of life, and what I want to do and what I want to be able to share and pass down to my family, and now a grandchild in the picture. And thinking about, there's a lot, this is a crazy, incredible time of history right now. There's a lot happening all over the globe, and there's a lot of things that are changing. And without getting in, again, a lot of these things become political now, which is unfortunate. But the idea of climate change and the weather changing, whether or not you believe that it's just a natural cycle or that humans caused it, either way, it kind of doesn't matter at this point, because it's actually happening and it's very obvious. I don't know if any of you guys saw the reports that came out yesterday, big news reports, that 2023 was the hottest year ever in recorded history ever. And the actual temperature increase that has happened, we're at 1.48 degrees Celsius and 2.66 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason why that matters is because 1.5 degrees Celsius is that big number that scientists have been warning us about, that's going to tip things into super crisis mode. And we're at 1.48. That wasn't supposed to happen for 20 years. They were saying, hurry up, within 20 years, we're going to hit this. And we're at 1.48. We're 2 decimal points away from that tipping point. And as we can all see, I mean, I'm in Montana right now. We have no snow. We've had no snow. Wow. The ski resorts, I mean, Montana's filled with ski resorts, and they're making that fake snow, they're losing tons of money. It's kind of cold. We're about to have a cold blast this weekend that's coming in from Canada, but we've got no moisture. We have terrible forest fires when we don't get enough snow. This is the least amount of snow that I remember ever having. Nothing. Literally, I'm looking out my window right now and it's just grass everywhere. Yeah. And I mean, we're in a situation where we're going to start seeing way, 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 way more natural disasters and bigger storms and everything. And I think it's super important to be talking about it and having this conversation, not only with each other, but with our kids. And
yeah, definitely want to bring in another guest and everything and see what they've got going on and all along those lines and all in that space, and that being Charley Lyons and all in that kind of way. But definitely want her to share her thoughts, and I've got some others that I'll be bringing in as well. But one thing you were saying, Genevieve, is that I've definitely seen a rise in people having conversations around, and I alluded to it earlier, mindfulness and everything. And I've actually had friends of mine that have considered me to be a light warrior, one that likes to have conversations and to bring change about and positive change. And I've even had some folks that say that despite all the turmoil, and I agree with you that there's a lot of turmoil going on, that they are seeing a shift where we may be going into a more positive light and all along those lines. And I hope that that is the case, and I hope that they are right in everything. But Charlie, have you shared some of your thoughts? And then if folks want to answer that idea as to whether we are having a positive shift, we may get into that conversation as well. But Charlie, share a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on.
Hi, I'm Charlie, and I catapult leaders from average to all-star through coaching and speaking and teaching. I too am a teacher and have worked in the leadership space. So I love the conversation before, such a rich conversation. And I'm excited to be part of it. Congratulations to you, Michael, on your book launching next week. Is that what? That's what it is.
That's
great.
Right. Yeah.
Good. Well, about a year ago, that's awesome. About a year ago, I went through the same process, and it sounds like you've been through it before. But the book is Average to All-Star, and really, what I do is I equip young leaders to start strong and go further faster in their lives and careers. I think if they can get some real good coaching and development early in their lives and careers, then they're able to just really set their lives on a different trajectory. And that's what I'm all about. I too am a teacher, like I said, Genevieve, and it took me back to listening to you talk. My dad was actually a biology teacher. So many times when I was a youngster on Sunday afternoons, we would go walk around the woods and learn about the different trees and all of those different things. So thank you for transporting me back to being a youngster and enjoying that time with my dad. And now I'm able to do it, not as much with two teenagers, but have always enjoyed that time. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you here and everything. You mentioned that the book is from average to all-stars, and I do know that sometimes people are content sometimes with being average, and that's one of the things that I talk about on this show and other shows. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, and like I said, I've got some other folks that I'll be bringing into the conversation as well. But there's this notion of that inner critic, and our inner critic can be the worst person because it can tell us all the reasons that we shouldn't do things and all in that space. And a lot of times, whether it's relationships or whether it's jobs, I know that I've even passed up on some jobs that I probably should have gone for because I was having that whole conversation about all the reasons that I wouldn't get it. And by the time I got the nerve to get it, it had already left. And the same with relationships. So there have been, because I'm in my early 60s and still in that single space where there have been young ladies that I might have been wanting to pursue and everything, but I would have that whole conversation as to why they would reject me. And by the time I went to ask them for the dinner date, they had already moved on and hadn't even had a chance to move in or have the early relationship at all because I had talked myself out of it. So I just wanted your thoughts around that. And if Genevieve and others want to jump in, because I do know our inner critic can be our worst enemy sometimes.
Absolutely, it can. And one of the things that I talk about and really work with young leaders, leaders just in general, is I believe there's 3 spheres that we really have to focus on in leadership. One of those is mindset, right? Kind of that positive psychology piece. And that's what I was hearing you say, Mark, like you're your own inner critic, your worst inner critic, right? Many times we have to flip that mindset upside down, right? And think, what do I have to lose if I ask the girl out? She goes out with somebody else, right? But hey, I might get the date and it might be a good thing for the rest of my life. You never know. So really focusing on mindset and kind of that positive psychology piece is really important. Another sphere that I really focus on with young people is that character sphere. Michael, I think you mentioned values earlier and staying true to your values. A values exercise, actually I have a really, really simple values exercise on my website, charlielyons.com. And it dwindles it down to 2 values. And that's one of the places that we start. And then we develop a lot of character things in that character sphere. And then I also think a third sphere, which is really, really important, is what I call power skills. Some people call those soft skills. I don't think there's anything soft about them. They are power skills, and they allow you to put yourself out there and lead and focus on others at the same time. And so is there a 4th sphere? Yes, absolutely. I think there is a functional sphere, right? You have to have functional skills. If I'm an accountant, I have to have accountant skills.
Mhm.
Those are those functional skills. But I believe that those three spheres, the character, the mindset, and the power skills, those are things that I work on developing with leaders so that they can go from average to all-star. Because if you think about most all-stars that you know, they are rock solid in all four spheres. I can't teach you how to be an accountant, but I can teach you the other three spheres. So
That makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Genevieve, that's one of your thoughts around the inner critic and all along those lines. Because even I'm going to give an example and everything, because I know, and you just mentioned it earlier, that even sometimes life will put different curves on you and everything. Because I have a very dear friend of mine who is a grandmother as well, and she's a grandmother. Actually, I want to say that she's in her early 50s and everything. So she's been a grandmother several times over at a very young age. Because I won't say the first time she became a grandmother, she was probably in her 40s and all along those lines. So definitely that was one of those life curves. I mean, she had 4 kids, so I knew that she expected the kids to have kids at some point or another. But sometimes the folks that are and when you have kids, and I know this from my brother, I remember this from me even when he was first married, and he's been married a couple of times and is now engaged and everything. But when he was first married to the mother of my nephews, I don't know that my parents were rushing off to him to be to be grandparents, but they now love being grandparents and love taking care of my nephews and everything, and even sometimes going to their soccer matches or some of their other sporting matches, and even enjoying the time with them. Both mom and dad have a lot of quality time with my nephews and everything. But I know that sometimes we are trying to delay that. That's one of those delay tactics that we sometimes do as well. And it sounds like you weren't rushing for your daughter to have kids either and everything. But I just wanted your thoughts around the inner critic and also this new part of your dynamic, because now you are a grandmother and it looks like you're fairly young as well.
Yeah, I'm in my early 50s as well. Yeah, I had my oldest daughter. I was 22, so I was young when I had her. So she waited till she was 28, which I was grateful for. But no, it's just it's the most amazing thing ever. It's just a whole different thing. They tell you that it's going to be like that, but I had no idea. I mean, I knew I would love the baby, but I'm just madly in love with him. It's the best.
it's showing in your face right now.
Oh, I can't wait to go see him. They thankfully live in the same city as me, so I get to see him pretty often. And if I don't get to see him, I get to FaceTime. So I have like 5,000 screenshots of us FaceTiming. He's just a tiny little baby. He's only 4.5 months old, but it's the best. But yeah, as far as inner critic, that's been a big theme in my life. I was unfortunately someone who was bullied really, really severely in school, all the way through, into middle school and even into high school, but really a lot in grade school. And I had a very low self-esteem when I was young. I was very insecure. And that really carried over and changed a lot of who I was. And it took a long time for me to, develop that sense of self again. And, I definitely struggled a lot with, imposter syndrome. And, I've been in a lot of situations in my life now with where my career has taken me, where I felt, I'll give you an example. We were just, my company is called Origins Curriculum. And we were just awarded the International Greening Education Solutions Provider Award that was presented to us during UN General Assembly's Climate Week at Cornell University, where I was a speaker in September. And I, when I first got invited to speak there, I was super nervous. I actually hired a public speaking coach. I was really nervous. And when I was looking at the list of all the speakers, and it was, professors and doctors and lawyers and all these things. And I just thought, who am I? And oh my gosh, I'm just, and it's taken a long time for me to really learn to accept myself and love myself and kind of be able to overcome that inner critic. And I think it's human nature for us to, be highly critical of ourselves, whether it's, starting off, often it's from a physical standpoint, just when we look in the mirror, and then it's, am I good enough to do this or that? There's, so many ways that can manifest. And I think that, Charlie, I love what you do. And I think I'm a big proponent of coaching. And I think that it's one of the most important things. The most successful people in the world, whether it's, professionals in every different career, everybody has a mentor. And I think mentorship, coaching, I think all of that is so important and has been really beneficial in my life. And I think for kids, it's super, super important. And that's why I think teachers are so important. Teachers are our first mentors, our first coaches, and our parents, right? So parenting and teachers especially, though, because not all kids end up in really solid family structures. There's a lot of kids that unfortunately are in toxic situations, are being raised in households that have a lot of dysfunction, kids that are in, foster system, or, there's all different kinds of things that can happen. People with the best of intentions sometimes aren't ready and are struggling themselves. And so I think teachers are such an important piece of that puzzle, because we have the opportunity to catch some of those kids that would otherwise fall through the cracks. And so even if you're not a teacher, just in everyday life, like Mark, you are with your nephews, and Michael, the people that you touch. And I think just any chance we have as adults to be mentors to young people, I think it's such a powerful gift that we can give, not only to ourselves, because I'm somebody that believes strongly in, the more that you give, the more that you get. And that's not the motivation for doing it, but that's just the way the universe works. So, it's always a beautiful thing to give. And it also changes the way people live in the world. The more people that have positive influence on them, the more harmonious all of society is going to be. So I think that can really help with the inner critic if we all have the opportunity to touch young people as much as possible. Help give them.
I'd love to hear your thoughts around that too. And Michael, I'm gonna bring in one of their other guests. We got 2 more to go and everything along those lines. But even in that space, I'm glad what you said about mentoring, because one of the things that I have done is I have a friend that passed away not that long ago that was a major dance instructor here in Durham, North Carolina. And I'm sure you know him, Mike Baba Chuck Davis, who has founded the African American Dance Ensemble and all along those lines. But one of the things is that he didn't have any kids of his own and everything. And there might have even been some questions around orientation and everything. And that's neither here nor there and everything. But it was definitely a mentor toward many, because he definitely mentored a lot of the kids and mentored a lot of people through his dance and all along that line. And that's something that I even try to do in my own life and everything, is I have a number of folks that I am a mentor to, and now I've seen some of them have kids of their own. So in some ways, I'm a grand mentor, if there is such a term. Or maybe I just made up the term and all along those lines, because there are folks that I mentored that are now having kids, and I'm sometimes mentoring their kids as well. So definitely, I think that is something that we can do as a society and all along those lines. And there are a number of societies. You mentioned Genevieve being of Native American or First Nation heritage, and that is a tradition in some of the First Nation cultures, as well as in some of the African cultures, is to have there was a politician, it might have been Hillary, they talked about it takes a nation to raise many, or something along those lines. And definitely that is something that I find to be very true statement and all along those lines. So it doesn't just take the parents, but as you mentioned, Genevieve, it takes the folks that are in the family structure, but also those that are willing to mentor. Because I've got another friend that's been on this show before, Renee Daughtry, and he's actually, to your point about technology, is teaching some of the kids about drones and some of the technology things, because he actually works for Cisco. So he's doing some of that kind of training to let them learn a new skill that they may not have and everything. But definitely glad to have our other guest on, Sasha, and everything in that space. I want to learn more about you, and definitely want to bring in the other 2 as well. But if you want to share a little bit about your story as well, and then we'll get into some conversation even around mentoring, because I think mentoring is very important. And my younger brother, the father of my nephews, is actually working with, and I hate to use this term, and I've said it before on the show, because sometimes I think it puts a stigma on people, but it's one term that is used a lot. But I hate using the term at risk, because then I think that you putting the stigma on the people by saying that they are at risk. And we do know that even here in North Carolina, there is gang violence and gang problems and things of that nature. But it's a term that I have trouble with sometimes, because I think it puts a stigma on people.
We're all at risk.
Exactly. We all at risk. Sasha, just tell a little bit about your story as well, and then I definitely want to hear from Michael about this whole notion of the inner critic as well. But Sasha, I think I pronounced that right, but if not, correct me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and good to meet all of you guys. Lovely conversation leading up to getting into the as we should say, like the studio. I am Sasha. I've been in marketing for about 20 years. I love the conversation in and around mentoring because I'm doing exactly that. So I have worked a lot of my career in enterprise. And recently, I would say about 4.5 years ago, I stepped out and I've developed my own agency in support of small businesses as well as startup companies. So it really is essentially mentoring these companies to get to market, or I am mentoring these companies to take a step back and optimize their marketing to get back into marketing. Why small business and not moving and supporting enterprise? I mean, I could get one enterprise client and I can be set. But for me, the small business and watching and supporting the small business companies during COVID and supporting them into pivoting their product and service within that positioning was something that was highly, how can I say, humbling to get them to continue to flourish within, times of change. And I think that in marketing as an industry as a whole, we don't put a lot of emphasis and focus on small businesses and startups. It's usually the big giants, but we need to really focus globally on the small business companies and the startups as we move forward, because they in essence support our, I would say, I think the last time I read this data, it's about 70% of our GDP global. So, I mean, there is a huge importance there. And even going back to mindset, I deal with a lot of that, when I work with clients in terms of the different types of founders, when they hire folks, or if they've had backlash with marketing and it's getting them to believe and really supporting them. It's not about them working with me and saying, you got to spend $10,000. No, we're going to get you into the market. We're going to slow and steady build you up, and we're going to, feed the funnel to get you there and inject things back into market as we move forward. So I'm super passionate about, bringing these folks forward. Congratulations, Michael, on your book. Genevieve, I've looked at your Instagram account and I think you're doing some incredible stuff. Charlie, I'm super interested to read your book. And as I'm also in the process of writing my book and I'm in editing phase, so I know what it's like.
Persevere.
Yeah, that's my word
question.
of the year is perseverance.
Good.
Lord, thank you.
Perseverance is the key and everything. Hey, Michael, definitely I want to hear your thoughts about inner critic, and definitely I'm going to bring in one of our other guests, and then I'll bring in the last one as well and everything. But Michael, as far as the inner critic, and then if you also want to give, and Charlie can do the same, advice to Sasha about the book, because she is an author and y'all have both written the book. So definitely I'd love to hear your thoughts around the inner critic, but also if you've got any advice to this author to be.
I feel like I'm surrounded by just amazing people on this call. So this is so much fun on this show. The idea of the inner critic is something that I think, we all get attacked by someone at some point. And I think, I have had a very, very privileged life. And so I've been very lucky all along the way to have mentors, to have great parents who've invested in giving me opportunities and experience. And, so I guess the thought that occurs to me is that if you are in a position of privilege, you need to look to find out how you can help provide that mentorship to other people, how you can help fight that inner critic with others. The book that I wrote is it's kind of all about this. It's about the idea of we are surrounded by marvelous wonders in each other, right? We amongst the entire cosmos, you're the only you that there can ever be. I'm the only me. So if there's a song that you're here to sing, I really should listen to it, and I should find the beauty in it, and I should find ways of encouraging you and getting you, excited about your potential. So that is something I'm also very passionate about. Several of us on this call are all about teaching and trying to raise other people up. That's absolutely in line with my DNA. The idea that if I have the chance to make somebody else's day brighter, that's one great thing. But if I have the chance to step into somebody's life over and over and over again and let them bounce ideas off of me and give them my perspectives, help them maybe avoid some, bad missteps that I remember making when I was, early on in my life, then that's what we're here for. If we're not here to be all in this together, then what's the point?
Yeah. And what advice would you give to Sasha about the book? And I'm going to ask Charlie the same thing, and I'm going to bring Anwen, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, into the conversation as well. But what advice would you give to our author?
Oh, gosh. My biggest piece of advice is that bad words on a page are better than no words on a page, right? All of the magic happens in editing. So
Yeah.
I would say just as much as you can put out on the page every single day that you have opportunity. Also be really forgiving of yourself on the days when you can't make the time, and just get right back into it the next chance that you get.
Agreed. Thank you.
Charlie, any advice before Anwen shares a little bit about her story as well?
Great advice, Michael. Sasha, I remember everything was edited, everything was ready to go. And to me, writing my book was kind of like a pregnancy, right? It took about the same amount of time. Like, I was ready to see what the child looked like. I knew what it looked like. But at the same time, there was part of me that was like, that inner critic was coming in, sneaking into the brain, right? Like, what if I put this out there and nobody likes it? What if my baby is ugly? Right? I mean, like, that was a real feeling for me. I hope you don't have that feeling, but I just want you to know that if you do,
Yeah,
I truly mean what I mean by persevere. Like, the flip side is true, right? Your baby may be beautiful. There may be people that can't wait to get their hands on it. And so listen to that side of your brain instead of my baby might be ugly, because I have a feeling, for me, it crept in, even though, I'm a mindset person. So just, keep those words on the page and persevere. Don't let that inner critic come into your brain, because I'm sure what you're writing, the world needs to hear. So
no, I love it. I love it. And I have thought about that, but I think it's at the same time, it's like, not everybody is for everybody, right? And who you're for. And I always try to keep that positive mindset and just keep moving, because there is going to be an audience that's for you and only you, and that's part of marketing as well, right?
Yeah. And if that inner critic comes in, you call me, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Anwen, if I pronounced that correctly, but if not, let me know, and definitely share a little bit about your story. Then I'll bring in our last guest, Patricia, and then we'll continue this conversation, because one thing creeped into my mind, and I'll get to that in a second, is this whole balance idea and everything. But Anwen, share a little bit about your story as well.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I never really know. Thanks, Mark, for having me on. So I'm Anwen Ba. I am a business wealth strategist, and I support mainly business women around, getting more of the ROI without slogging through, spreadsheets and different softwares and so forth. So it's all about profitability, sustainability, and longevity. I come from an investment banking background. So I've been in finance for almost 20 years now. And a lot of this came about because whilst working in investment banking, you have the ultra high net worth individuals. And one thing I noticed about all of them, they were all business owners, every single one of them, CEOs down to just normal people. They were all business owners. And the way we managed their money that was coming from their business was very different from the way small business owners were dealing with their money. If I could say, small business owners were running on a treadmill when it comes to their finances, whilst, these ultra high net worth individuals put the treadmill on a car and drove away with the car. That is basically what it is. So I'm trying to implement or get small business owners to start putting these systems in place much earlier in their business, rather than leaving it for when I, hit million or when I 200K. Because a lot of the time, as I say, 5% of 10 pounds is very different from 5% of 10 million. So a lot of those mistakes and trials and errors led to it when we're still at the 10 pounds level of business. so that by the time it's 10 million, it's just run of the mill and we're just getting on with it. And that's a lot of the things that a lot of these ultra high net worth individuals have, is that they have the team, they have the people to kind of put all of this in place for them without a lot of the trial and error. So that is where I come from. And I love the conversation so far. I come from a diplomatic background. So I've traveled a lot with Dad, and I don't necessarily have a root per se. I don't feel like I have a root. I relate to all the cultures I've been in, but then I relate to none of them, if that makes sense. So a lot of what Genevieve was saying around, having the roots and so forth, I really resonate with that, because it's then being able to find what it is you feel you can connect with the new culture that you're in. Like they used to call us third culture kids, that our parents is one culture, we grew up in another culture, and then we speak another culture. And that is very, very hard as well. And sometimes what I envied about like other colleagues that I've come across is that they had like, oh yes, we've been friends since we're in nursery, or we've been friends since high school. I'm like, my friends are scattered all over the world, and I don't have that connection with them where, I'll invite them to my wedding, or with my best man, grade of honor, and so forth. So it's very, very different. So being able to find that connection and honing in is very important for me. And I have the bug. I travel with my kids now as well, because I get bored. I get bored very easily. So I up and go to the next destination. So to be able to find roots in that is quite important for me.
This is for everybody here on the call and everything. And like I said, I'm going to bring in Patricia as the last guest and everything. But how important do you think it is to have connections to your culture and everything? Because we talked about that at the beginning with Genevieve and the First Nation connection. And I mentioned that I've got relatives that are in that space as well and everything. And then I'm imagining that your own roots, Anwan, are probably in one of the African nations, and all along those lines, or maybe one of the Caribbean nations. But definitely, I was just wondering, how important is it to have those heritage connections, even if it's like Italian or Irish or whatever the other connections are? So just wondering, to everybody here on the call, how important is it to be connected to whatever your heritage is?
It has been very, very important. And funny enough, I am from Cameroonian descendant, grew up, born and raised in London, lived in Mexico, lived in France, lived in the US. So I picked up all these different cultures as I was growing up. And I guess during my time in the UK, because that was where my developmental years kind of happened, there was a lot of shedding of your own culture to embrace the European culture so that you can fit in. And it's great now, at least for the last probably decade or so, where there's a renaissance of you actually embracing your own culture. And I really, really love that, because we're embracing our own culture, we're embracing our own names, we're embracing what things mean for us. And also we see our counterparts making an effort to accept that, rather than having to alter ourselves to fit into their society. Because what we mentioned earlier about colonizers and colonizees, it's happened, unfortunately, but now we're in this quagmire that we all have to deal with. And the best way to deal with it is just, again, more acceptance, more inclusivity, and being able to, appreciate the fact that we're all very, very different, and yet we're all very, very the same.
Along those same lines, Michael, I know that part of your work is actually what she just alluded to, because I know part of the work that you do is around inclusion, and that's inclusion around orientation, inclusion around race, inclusion around a number of things. And we've even seen, and I know we could go down a whole political lane, and I'm not one to do that usually on the online dinner party, but there's even been conversations around people that have been shamed for their ethnicity and everything. Because I just recently read the quote that the current Republican president gave around Nikki, and was wondering and raising the question as to whether she is even eligible to be president because of her Indian descent. And he tried the same thing with Obama and a number of other folks as well. But I just wanted your thoughts around inclusion and diversity, because that whole DEI conversation has been one that I think has taken a different twist than I think it was intended for. But that's just my own personal opinion. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Michael.
So I come at this from a very, very odd background. I used to work in the planetarium field, and so I would go into a room with the big curved surface with all the stars overhead, and I would point out, here's Orion's belt, and there's Sirius, and here's Lepus the hare, and all of the rest. And it's just years of being saturated in that environment. I recognize that we're tiny we're incredibly minute. I mean, if you had a desktop globe that's about a foot wide, we would each be 1/600,000th of an inch tall. We'd be little specks of dust. And so for us to argue over how really important we are, or how our culture is the best culture, or it's just always rubbed me the wrong way. It's just, it doesn't make any sense at all. On the other hand, if we are these tiny little specks, shouldn't we try to stick together? Shouldn't we try to understand everything that we can about what's beautiful about the different aspects of the cultures that are brought to the table? I grew up watching Star Trek, probably not a big surprise to anybody here. But the idea on any of the Star Trek shows is that you deserve a seat at the table, no matter what you look like, no matter what your background is, if you're from an alien planet or you're a shimmering orb, it doesn't, or if you're a woman, right? And in our cultures, that hasn't been the case. And I've always been absolutely baffled by that. I was raised by two PhD scientists. My mom was always the person who was teaching me the really hard, really intricate things. And so I grew up in a household where anybody, should be valued, right? Not that the culture is going to make it easy for them to be valued and heard, but everybody should be. And so that's my take on it.
Yeah. Genevieve, what's your take on it? Because one of the things that I have admired about First Nation people, and like I said, I do have cousins that are very involved in the powwow circuit and definitely travel on that powwow circuit quite often, is the connection to dance. And I mentioned that earlier and everything because of the traditional dance, but also this kind of like ability to try to stay connected to the Most High, whatever you want to call the Most High. Some people in the Native First Nation would call it the Great Spirit, or a number of other ways that you can term it. But I do know friends of mine that still do the sweat lodges and still do kind of purification traditions to try to make sure that they are connected to the Great Spirit, or something that is beyond what we are here on this planet and everything. But I'd love to hear your take on that as a member of the First Nation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a connection to whatever you want to call it, whether it's God, Jehovah, Jesus, whatever your religion is, or if you're non-religious, even people that are agnostic or even atheist, I think people can have a connection to something, whether it's nature, whether it's culture, and I think that is such an important thing for human beings' mental health. Obviously coming from the reservation, there's a very strong sense of culture, and a lot of people, being in the United States, there's a lot of people, obviously everybody that wasn't originally here immigrated here or were brought here. And a lot of people have lost connection with their ancestral culture, their ancestral spirituality, whatever that may be for whoever it might be. And I think, being on a sort of a quest to find that again is something that could be super helpful for anybody. A lot of people don't know what their backgrounds are. They don't know what their ethnic backgrounds are. We have DNA tests now. There's a lot of ways to, and now we're in the information age and the internet age. And so, there's ways that you can kind of track back and try to find, but then you've got people that are adopted who, don't know what their background is as well. But I think having that connection with culture, if you can find it, and with community, even, whether or not you have your, displaced and not around your people, and you might be in a, one of somebody in a group of others, but finding that sort of community, I think, is so important. Whether it's a higher power, whether it's a group, I think for mental, spiritual health, even physical health, I think it's super, super important.
I definitely agree with you on that and everything. This is very bad, and I definitely want to hear Patricia's story as well as one of the last people to come into the conversation and everything. But one of the questions I was going to get to everybody, and then definitely, like I said, I definitely want Patricia to introduce herself as well, is this notion of that connection, because a couple of y'all have mentioned it during this time of being connected to parents, being connected to, I think somebody mentioned their grandparents and other things. So I was wondering how important is it to have that connection, because I know that even in my own life, my grandmother passed when I was in my probably was in my 20s, so in the like 1980s and everything. But I still feel her influence on my life, because she definitely created the first African American library in Raleigh, which is our state capital, and all along those lines. And she did a number of other things and was very much into the cultural community, knew Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and some of those people directly and on a personal level. So even though she's been gone from this planet for 40 years, I still feel a connection to her. And just like I mentioned, Baba Chuck, who passed like within the last few years and everything, I still feel a connection to him, even though he's no longer on the planet. So I just wondered, for everybody here, how important is it to have that ancestral connection? Anybody want to take it? I'll throw it to you, Antoine.
Oh, for me, it's very important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical person. It's just knowing where you belong, if you want to belong there. It's just being able to know that, okay, if, anything should happen, this is where my spirit lies, if that makes any sense. And apologies about the background. This is where my spirit lies. So it's kind of, belonging. I think belonging is the most important thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be culture. It doesn't necessarily have to be parent. I mean, you can choose where you belong, to be quite fair. It's just more within you, what it is that aligns with you, what it is that aligns with your spirit, for you to feel fulfilled, for you to enjoy the human experience, because at the end of the day, it's so short.
Charlie, and I'm definitely want to hear from Genevieve as well, but Charlie and Sasha, that is something I've been hearing a lot of people talking about lately, and it's definitely in the leadership space. And Michael may have a thought around this as well, because a lot of people are these days talking about finding your tribe, which is finding like-minded people that are doing like-minded things and that resonate with you and everything. I would argue that everybody here is a member of my tribe, and all along those lines, and my many other guests that I've had on the show have been, for the most part, I'd say about 99.9%, if not 100%, members of the tribe as well. But how important is it to have members of the tribe and to connect with people that are like-minded and everything, even in the business community? That's why I threw it at both you, Sasha, and you, Charlie, and everything. So any ideas around that? Because I heard a lot of people talking about, make sure that you are with your tribe.
Shall I go, Charlie?
Go for
I
it.
think, even as a business owner myself and talking to small business owners, I think what keeps you going is a community, and like really learning and understanding from others, and like what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. And I think that's hugely important, because it's the perseverance of keep moving forward, right? It is, all of this is tied to each other. I'm like Emba. I'm a third culture child. I grew up in an expat country. My parents are from two different cultures, and I grew up predominantly with one set of culture. And then I moved to the United States to have to adapt to that culture, right? So it is finding your groove, it's finding yourself. But I think foundationally, what is built at home, and whether you don't have it built at home, it's finding that foundation to be able to springboard off of that. And I think the same is within the business community as well. It's like, find the people that have done it before, and what advice can they give them? It's just like Michael and Charlie, are giving me advice about, getting to the end of writing my book, right? It's just you have to pay attention and listen, because if you don't, like, you're going to make the mistakes that they made. And I think that's the key thing, is just focus on what others have done, what has worked and what hasn't, and take those lessons into consideration.
That makes a lot of sense. What is your take on that, Charlie?
So my take on that is, you really have to understand your authentic self first, right? That's really a lot of the work that I do in my coaching and in my workshops. I talked a little bit about the core values assessment. I think you really have to authentically know who you are first, before you can go look for a tribe, right? One thing I will say, I'm there with Genevieve in the early 50s. And I have had several different tribes as I've gone through different ages and stages and chapters in my life. And I've had some people that have maybe left my tribe, not really left my tribe, but maybe they weren't sitting at the table right then, right? That have come back. There's an ebb and flow to it that I have found throughout my career. Not that my values are changed or that who I am, who I understand myself to authentically be has changed, but ages and stages and chapters of life have a factor in that as well. But I do believe a tribe is so very important, not only to have one, but to be a part of several others' tribes is very, very important.
Yeah. Patricia, definitely introduce yourself, and I've got a question about the tribe mentality as well, because it's another part of the conversation that comes up sometimes as well. But Patricia, definitely introduce yourself and share a little bit about what's going on in your life as well.
Well, I'm 75, so I'm a bit older than the group, and it's lovely to see you all. I'm a grandmother, so I don't believe that pessimism is an option right now with anything. Even a great uncle and anybody that's in the mentoring, I don't think pessimism is an option. My passion is children. I started teaching in 1968. I retired in 2008, and I raised 2 children and now 5 grandchildren. And my grandchildren have inspired me to write 5 children's books that are touching everything you're saying. The first one is I Am Amazing, where I repeat I am amazing 5 times, and I can 14 times. And so the child, when he or she reads, those words can help the self-talk. They can start to believe in themselves. And the last says, I will remember my whole life through. I am amazing, and so are you. So it's not just this, oh, it's me. It's also all of us together. And the second one in that series is We Are Amazing, talking about the need for connectedness with all of us. And finally, life is amazing, because so many of our kids now are losing hope, and they are giving up on life, and they are not seeing what a gift it is. So that little series took me 14 years to write. So I'm not a very good mentor for book writing. But I also wrote another couple of children's book in there, but it was always the grandchildren that were inspiring me, and the students that I taught. And I don't know, I think it is the time. Yes, I'm a mongrel. I mean, I've got so many strains. I get to tell jokes on many cultures because I've got lots of strains. And I think it's really important to find a tribe. I think that's very, very important, but also within the tribe to be open to bridges to other tribes, so that we can get this, the polarization is concerning me. And if we can start to say, I want to hear about your tribe, and what do we have in common? I think it's us as human beings finding what we have in common and accepting and understanding the differences as well. So I guess that's
I appreciate that and everything. And along that line, and this is for everybody, and then I might get to some of the other questions as well. You actually bring a very interesting point up, Patricia, because there's been a lot of conversation lately about how troubled our kids are and everything. And like I said, I don't have any of my own, but I do have those nephews that are about to turn 15 and 16. And I do sometimes wonder what kind of world they will be coming into and all along those lines. I'm sure that's even a thought of yours, Genevieve, with your grandkid and everything, because there is this polarization and divide that is going on. So I am optimistic, because I do see some things that with our young people that shows me that they are willing to make some changes and some positive changes, but I also am somewhat afraid of the world that they are stepping into, and that's just me being very candid and everything. But I just wondered y'all's thoughts around that, because this is a very trying time, and we do know that unfortunately the rates of mental illness and among our youth has been at an all-time high, and there are definitely even some people that are taking their lives at a very young age as well. So I just wondered your thoughts around that and what we can do to make things better for our young people.
Are you asking me?
I'll take it, Genevieve. I'll take it to you, Genevieve. Then I want to hear from you, Patricia, and anybody else that wants to answer as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, the suicide rate on the reservation is higher than any other group in the nation. And youth, particularly, it's a really big problem here. Depression, other forms of mental illness, and I think there is a lot of despair. And I believe that stems from multiple things, including disconnection. a disconnection from the land, a disconnection from community that we're talking about that is so important. And I think a lot of that is honestly a symptom of capitalism, the culture of capitalism. You know, when we look at societies around the globe before the sort of Western capitalist movement, people were living in tribal societies and in villages and groups, and just this idea of each man for their own, and we're going to leave our families and spread out, and everybody's on their own, and it's me against, you know, it's this individualism. And you know, that's the very premise of capitalism. It's this competitive, you know, get as much as you can. And I think that that has really permeated the culture of America and caused a lot. You know, you hear people saying the term late stage capitalism, you hear that being thrown around a lot, but it's really true. And I think we're seeing symptoms of that across the nation, both in mental health and then also in the environmental destruction that's happened because of that as well. So I really think, you know, it kind of all ties together, all the things we've been talking about, you know, community, you know, culture, connection, all of these things are related topics, and it's such an important time. And I think it for me and for the work that I do, you know, finding that connection to the land again, that's kind of the most fundamental. You know, even if you're completely alone and you don't have any other family and you're not connected to your culture, you can connect to the land. You can connect to the earth. You can have a relationship with the planet. Like when everything else is stripped away, there's always that. And I think that that is truly the foundation of, you know, this is what we come from. We come from the earth, and that is the, you know, the original relationship, I think, that we need to rekindle.
Yeah. Patricia, what's your take on that as a grandmother here and everything? I mean, there's some other younger grandmothers, but what are your thoughts around this notion of what we can do to improve the situation for our young people?
Well, I think starting young, the connection. I think starting very, very young, right from the get-go, conversations, walks, talks, you know, spending designated time with the little ones, I think is very, very important. Talking to them and listening to them because they have so much to say, you know. But I agree with everything that Genevieve is saying. It is this connection to the earth and to the gift of life. I mean, and to being kind, as Michael says. I mean, everything we've spoken about is connection. I mean, I know kids that connect best to animals, and that keeps them going. We're connecting to a dream that they want to fulfill. So yeah, it's finding the thing in everyone you meet that will work for that one. Often we walk by the ones who need the connection the most. Yeah. Because they have their head down or something. And if you just say hi, whether they say hi back or not isn't really too important. And have a good day. Little simple things, but if enough people do that day will be different for that kid.
Yeah, sometimes just something simple that can make the kid's day or just make a change in the kid's day and everything else. The thing that I was curious about, because it's come up in some conversations, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but this is for Genevieve, but then I've got another question for everybody. How important do you think it is when we're talking about tribal, and maybe Anwan has some thoughts around this, tribal affiliations or connections, to have those authentic connections? Because we do know that there are a number of people that will see a benefit to claiming a certain tribe or a certain culture because they see the, coming back to your capitalism, they see the capitalistic benefit of being named on, and you mentioned it earlier, the roles, the Indian roles and everything, because some of those native tribes will have casinos. And I've even seen that in some of the African and Caribbean nations, because we're seeing some of them develop their own resources and everything. So people that may not be, say, from Uganda, because I do, Uganda has a oil culture and everything now, may decide that they want to claim their Ugandan citizenship. And there was even some people that were urging people to come back to their homeland because they also wanted people from their lands to come back to what they considered their original lands. Because I knew that was going on in Ghana and a number of other countries as well. But I just wanted y'all's thoughts around that, this notion of either reclaiming a true heritage or maybe even claiming a heritage that isn't yours in the first place and everything. But I just wanted your thoughts around that, because some people will do it for selfish reasons. I'll just leave it at that.
Right, right. I mean, I think that's definitely something that has happened. There's been some famous cases of things that have come up in the news recently. Obviously, if there's bad intentions behind it, it's something that you don't want to encourage. But I think people connecting to their roots and finding their roots, no matter what it is, I think it's something that is to be encouraged, because again, for that same reason that we've been talking about, that connection and to culture. I mean, human beings are social creatures. We are cultural creatures, and we've been disconnected over millennia because of the Western capitalist culture, and it's stripped a lot of the richness out of life, and I mean that in multiple levels. The natural resources are stripped on a literal level, but then on a spiritual and social level, we've been stripped from what connects us to the very basis of being human. And so I think anybody that can research their roots and get connected back to the original culture of their people. And a lot of people are super mixed, like me. I have my DNA test is all kinds of stuff, but it's fascinating to try to find out the history of the different lineages that you come from, and ancestral lines, and it can only enrich your life to go back and try to make those connections. So I highly encourage everybody to research into your ancestral backgrounds and find it. And I think that one thing that we see a lot more frequently is in that topic of people trying to claim ancestry that's not theirs, or things like that, outside of the people that are doing it particularly or specifically for monetary reasons. I think a lot of people, especially of European ancestry that are Americans, they see other cultures that have these strong, rich cultural practices, and they want that too. And everybody wants that, again, because that's what we come from way, way, way back. Everybody comes from that originally, right? So I think that, it's something that people long for. They long for ceremony. They long for, just that sense of community and ceremony. And so, yeah, I encourage everybody to look into their backgrounds. Absolutely.
No doubt. One of the other things that I know, even with some of my artist friends I've had on this show and other shows, is this notion of activism. And we've seen a rise in activism in the society in general. So for everybody on the call, how important do you think it is to have a activist spirit in whatever work you are doing, and to bring a tie of activism into it? Because we've definitely seen a number of conversations around a lot of issues, whether it's around some of the things we talked about, like the environment or race relations, or a number of other things. I do know that even in the Indian culture, there was a organization that I don't know how active they are, but they used to be very active, called AIM, which was the American Indian Movement, and all along those lines. But I just wonder, how important is it to have activism just in everybody on the call's life? Because I definitely consider myself to be a media person, and also in the lane of doing some creative things as well. But I also consider myself an activist because of my own family's history and them being activists from a young age. So I was actually born into activism because my dad and mom and even some other relatives were activists at a very young age. So it's kind of one of those heritage things, just like the library and the creative stuff came from grandma. There were some other things that came from my family that were in the activist spirit. So how important is activism in everybody's life here? Anybody want to take it?
I think it changes the narrative. I think it's got to be part of your DNA. I think we are seeing it on a political lens. I think we're seeing it on a spiritual lens. I think we're seeing it in a variety of different lenses. And if you, and it is the double-edged sword of technology, where, I think technology has really advanced us in so many ways in a positive manner. And I think technology has taken us away from what Genevieve talks about, which is your foundation, your root, where you come from, which is why I think a lot of this is happening, why a lot of the mental health issues are happening, and so on and so forth. But if you're not active in what you believe in, or if you're not active in the community you believe in, there is no way you're going to flip the narrative to the next person next to you, and so on and so forth. But activism with the spirit, it's like, a meditation teacher once told me there's worthy inquiry. So if somebody asks you about something and continues to ask you, then there's inquiry to push them into that realm, right? And if they don't, then they'll eventually come around. But I think it's super important.
Yep, I can definitely see that and everything. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts, but even what you were saying, Sasha, there's been a lot of conversations, and actually this might be for you, Charlie, and everything, but because we alluded to it earlier in this conversation, even with our young people, where a lot of people are, and we're even doing the show now on the StreamYard, and definitely it is in that social media platform, but there are a lot of people that are frustrated by what Genevieve mentioned earlier, which is that as a youngster, she would go running out into the being involved outside in playing, and we don't see enough of that with our kids now. I remember that when I was dating a young lady I had two kids at the time, one that was in junior high and the other was in high school, and they're now grown adults in their 20s now. But when I was dating them, that was something that took place regularly, was that she would try to encourage her youngest to go outside, because if she had her way, she would be inside on the tablet all day long and everything in that space. And I've seen that even when I've gone out to local restaurants, where you'll see entire families that are on their tablets with somebody other than the people that they're in the room with and everything. So I just wonder your take on that and what we can do to improve that communications level, because it does seem like we are very inundated by the social media and the computers, and I'm not knocking it. I've actually got friends that are in the AR and the VR spaces, and it can be a good tool and everything, but it can also be one that we might have to have some limitations on. And I'll just put it that way, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think you have to be very intentional. Right? Very intentional, especially, when they're young. I was actually thinking just the other day that I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. And when they were young, I don't even remember when I got my first smartphone, right? When I had a screen in front of me all the time. But it wasn't when they were young. And well, I guess it was. I don't know. I can't put a period in that time, but I'm really blessed that I don't have little ones now because it is so prominent. But I think some of it is, like I said, we have to be really, really intentional with it, right? Having children's books that we're reading, or having intentional conversations. I think that's really important as we influence young ones and as we parent. But one thing that I'm also seeing as well with having two teenagers is how to help them be intentional with it. It's not just me saying your phone needs to be on the counter at 8 p.m. and you're not taking it to your bedroom. Now that I have an 18-year-old, he knows that that's the rule of the house, and not that he probably couldn't handle it, but some of it is like Genevieve says, getting back to the land. To me, it's like getting enough rest. Right? That's important as well. And you're not resting well if you're on a screen. And so some of it is I think we have to be very intentional with it. Technology is a wonderful thing. But I remember Dr. Tim Elmore, who actually wrote the foreword to my book. I remember him several years ago putting out, and there were 3 things related to technology. Does it make my life better? How does it make my life worse? I'm not using the exact verbiage, and how can I use it in a very positive way, right? Just kind of 3 simple little guidances in terms of technology to help me as a parent be intentional, but also to help instill that in my young people, because my son's going to launch off to college here in about another 8 months, and I won't have any control of that. It does. His phone won't have to be on the counter by 8 p.m. So hopefully I have instilled that in them as well. But the one word I would just say is intentionality.
Yeah, intentionality makes a lot of sense and everything. Just really quickly, for everybody here on the call and everything, what is your thoughts around? Because we've kind of alluded to it several times, and like I said, many of you have rich families in the sense of being grandparents, or in the sense of being parents, and even in your case, having college-age kids and everything. But one of the things that we talked about on this show and several shows is this notion of the work-life balance. So, how do y'all get that work-life balance going, and what advice do you have for folks that are trying to do that work-life balance? Because I'm imagining that whether it is a significant other or a children or the business itself, a lot of times we are being pulled in several different directions. Because even myself, even though I'm single, I am involved in a multitude of businesses. So even in that sense, I'm being pulled in various directions as well. So I'm just wondering, how do you do that work-life balance?
I think balance is, for me, a very unattainable goal. I might get balance for about 30 seconds and then I'm back off again. And so to me, I'm not trying to achieve work-life balance because I'm not sure I can ever be balanced in that. To me, it's a weaving process. That it's life, right? There's not one or the other. So my thought is I try not to have that goal of balance, because then I'm constantly beating up on myself. Because
What about
balance
you, Anwan and Sasha? How do you deal with that work-life balance, or are you like Charlie, that you're like not trying to achieve it? It's an impossible goal and everything. But how do you deal with that quote-unquote work-life balance?
I'm with Charlie on this one. There's no balance whatsoever. There's no balance. It's all about prioritization. And we have 100%, and you have to decide what percentages you allocate to what. Maybe in your business, you're in a launch mode, so maybe that might take 70% of your time, whilst family takes 30%. Then maybe the kids are, on spring break, then maybe they get 70% and the business gets 30%. It's always a matter of prioritization, and it's easier to deal with as well. And coming mom here as well, I'm not dealing with mom guilt. When you're trying to achieve work-life balance, which doesn't exist, there's always the mom guilt that you have to deal with. There's always the societal pressures and expectations that you need to deal with. As much as we're like, no, I'm my own person, independent woman, you still hear it. People still feel very entitled to give you their opinions of how to do things and the best way to go about things. So you being able to find what matters to you at that point in time in your life, then go with that. That is the balance, because when you're done with that, you feel fulfilled and you know, okay, I've dedicated it. And also everybody else around you knows as well that, okay, mom is in launch mode. So she's just a ghost in the house right now. Or, we're on holidays. What are we doing? Where are we going? Because that's the expectation, that when they're on break, we're up to something. So it's interesting. And it's very cultural as well, from what Genevieve and Patricia and Sasha was saying. I just noticed that it's a very, very different culture with what the expectations and the life is in the States. And I've noticed it being here as well. And what it is in, let's say, when we're in Italy, that communal feeling is still there. There might not necessarily be blood related, but it's still there, whilst probably over here it's non-existent. So there's always, people in the same flat, or I don't know how many surrogate grandmothers I've got now over the life of moving around. So culture plays a very, very big part in our expectations. And for lack of a better word, the American culture is the worst of all. Is the most draining, and also is the most fragmented. From my experience, coming from, experiencing different cultures, and also from, I guess, a Black person's point of view as well. It's very, very different. There's certain things that I could relate to to an African American, and others that I'm like, I don't know what that feels like. It's totally over me. It's totally over me. And being able to appreciate that is like, wow. Totally different experience, totally different expectations. And funnily enough, we all come from the same descendants. So they're like Afro-American. I'm like, yeah, I'm African too, but I do not relate to any of what you just experienced there. So taking that into consideration makes a whole lot of difference, not also with those around you, but with your family, and also the expectations you have of yourself.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I've heard in different communities, even on some of the different shows here, is this notion that there is still some of the stereotypes that exist of African Americans, even in Africa and all along those lines, because definitely that is something I think you were alluding to, because there's some people, even in the African American culture, that have stereotypes about what's going on. Well, Africans that have stereotypes about African Americans and vice versa. There are African Americans that still have stereotypes about Africa and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your observation of that, because I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, is this kind of like notion that sometimes people are thinking that you'll have a greater understanding than you might have, but you didn't grow up in that environment. So if somebody's talking about what they went through oppression wise in Detroit or Atlanta, that might not be something you can relate to, because you might not have gone through the same kind of oppression at the same time and everything. But I just wondering your take on that. And is that correct? That that's what I'm hearing, is that you're saying that sometimes they are expecting you to maybe know more than you are actually in the knowledge of, and all along those lines.
As humans, we like to bucket everything. We like to group everything. We like to put things in little boxes so that it makes sense to us. So that is absolutely expected, so to say. But yeah, you have got a point there. Because I'm of African descent as well, there's just this camaraderie that might not necessarily be 100% like this. I could empathize, I could pull from my own experiences, but also even within myself as well. I grew up in a diplomatic bubble. So it was international schools. So I as well, I've got my own little, like I might, but I might not. So it's also taking that in place, that at face value, a dime might not necessarily be the same dime. And taking that into perspective, because it definitely differentiates how we experience certain events in our life. Like Chimamanda, the author of Americana, she kind of said she wasn't a Black person until she came to the States. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because back in Nigeria or back home, she's just Chimamanda, one of many, whilst when you move to Europe or to the States, you become then a Black person. It's like, oh, I am Black. All right. Thanks for bringing that up. And then you just move on with it. So it's one of the things that I kind of took into consideration when I had my kids. We kind of moved to the Caribbean so that they are just one of many, because for me, I needed them to be grounded in themselves, so that, yes, you are, this person, you are John, you are Mary, you are Joseph. Be grounded in that before you go out in the world and having to deal with, you are Black, you're a teen, you are from Atlanta, you are from the North, you're from the South, and all the labels that the world starts giving you. And especially in the UK, when you're not solid in that, then all those labels shake you. So that is the way I dealt with it. Like, let me go, because that's how I grew up. I was in a bubble. I was very protected from all the labels before I had to go out in the world. And that's when I went to uni, or was it college? And then having to deal with, there are all these other labels, and then go into work and, there are all these other labels. I was able to deal with it a lot better than I would say the British that grew up full-time in the UK, because then they didn't have that foundation. So it matters. And it's very, very different from all of us, I would say.
Yeah, I got you. Hey, Michael, just really quickly, because I do know that you're in that space of dealing with the DEI conversation and all along those lines, but that is something that I also see happen quite a bit, as well as this notion of a lot of times corporations will want you to get into the corporate identity, and sometimes they'll pay attention to the ethnic identity of the various people, members of their culture. And then sometimes there are folks that just want you to be focused on whatever the mission of the company is, and not necessarily pay attention to the ethnic divide or the different diversity that is in the company. And we've seen some companies even get in trouble for not being willing to talk about diversity and only want to be focused on whatever their product is, whether it's like Pfizer and drugs or Caterpillar and tractors or whatever, but they only want to be focused on those particular product and not necessarily the employees themselves. So I was wondering your take on that, and how important is it for the companies to deal with the diversity of their employees?
I think it's such an important conversation. I think that any company that is not interested in talking about DEI, any company that's not interested in having employee resource groups that are focused on a variety of different subcultures within the company, those are the ones to worry about. Those are the ones to try to get out of, because If they're not interested in having that conversation, or more importantly, if they're not interested in listening really hard to all of their employees, then you should run for the hills. I mean, I'm fortunate right now. I work for a company called Gilead Sciences. That's my day job. And, there are many different employee resource groups. And each of the employee resource groups has the opportunity to voice the concerns that they have and to try to focus on, we have women at Gilead. We have Gileados, and I was a co-chair for that for a while. We have Globe, and which is the Gilead leadership of Black employees, right? So all I'm trying to say here is, if the company is interested in hearing the different subgroups within that company, then they can better reflect what's going on and make better decisions. I mean, it's just shown time and time again, if you're hearing from the different pieces of, of minority groups, of women employees, of just everybody, LGBTQIA plus groups, you make better decisions. And in the case where I'm working for a pharma company, we're trying to recruit, people to our clinical trials to make sure that they are from a variety of different groups, so that we make sure the medicines don't just work on, adult white males age 50 to 60, right? You want to make sure that your medications are going to work for everybody. Also, if your workforce really looks very white and very male, it's hard to go into communities and say, trust us, we're going to give you medicine now. That's a recipe for disaster. You want to make sure that you have a huge, broad swath of different kinds of people doing the work, so that you're caretaking it properly, and so that you make sure that you are, conversing with the community properly. Otherwise, why should anybody trust you, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Shirley and Sasha, one of the other things that I've come across in business, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is, we talked earlier about passion and, supporting dreams, and even the tribe, and supporting the tribe members and everything. But some people will try to get you to live their dreams and everything. So I was wondering, as business coaches, your advice for that, because I do know that there are a number of people that are, have their own dreams, and sometimes their dreams don't necessarily match your dreams, and they might even be on the same page and all along those lines, but because they might have a greater space of connections or greater whatever, they might try to push you into giving up on your dreams and actually subverting your dreams to their dreams. And I'm sure you've run across that even with some of your own business coaching and everything. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to how you deal with that, and what advice you give to people when there are folks that are trying to, maybe you want to open a newspaper, and your friend wants to open this big entrepreneurial business. So he's like, the newspaper will never work. Why don't you go fall into my business and everything? And then we'll get to the newspaper after we get my business to launch, and all along those lines. But they will try to get you to switch your dreams, for lack of a better term.
Thank you, Sasha. I come across this all the time. I spent over 12 years at Purdue University. Over 15 of my professional years have been in higher education. And so I found this many, many, many times as I was coaching students. And I believe that's why there's the power of coaching, is that, many times students would come to the university and would be like, oh, well, I'm, mom and dad are paying for my education. They want me to get a business degree, or, they expect me to go into the corporate world. And, so many times they were chasing dreams that weren't necessarily their own. And I would see them hit a wall. And it was typically in the second semester of the sophomore year or the beginning of the junior year. I could almost set my watch by it. And I could tell you could tell by reading them that this was not their dream. And you don't know how many times I would, in a coaching conversation, would ask them, what do you want to do? And they go on, oh, well, I want to blah, 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 because mom and dad expect this and blah. And I'd be like, whoa, stop right there. I'm going to ask you again. What do you want to do? And actually, it's kind of ironic, because the opening story in Average to All-Star is about a young woman. And this is exactly the conversation that I had with her. She came back from an internship that she was just absolutely miserable. and she was on the verge of tears. And I remember thinking, I need to get her out of this building. Let's go get a cup of coffee. And really her dream was to open her own boutique, online boutique, which she ended up doing. But she was like, my mom and dad expect me to go into the corporate world. They're spending all this money to educate me and, all of that. Well, now, she opened her own online boutique and actually had her mom really help her. And she now works for Spanx, and so she has gone into the corporate world, but she really followed her dream. But it took a lot of coaching for her to really think about that and what she really wanted to do. You've heard a theme from me as we've spent some time together here, and it's authenticity, right? Knowing who you authentically are is so important. And I found college students and those young professionals, that's really what they're looking for. And that's really what I take them through with my Level Up Leadership Coaching Program, is understanding their strengths, understanding how they're motivated, understanding their personal brand. And so there's a number of things that we work on with that, because I think it's so important, because when they know that, like I said, they're able to start stronger and go further faster if they know what their authentic selves and what are their authentic dreams. So I see it all the time. That's a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah. Patricia and Sasha, I'd love to hear your thoughts around that as well, because I don't think it's just the young people that fall into that, because I've definitely even seen some people that are in their middle age, and even some that are in their elderly ages that have also fallen into this trap of people that are trying to get them to pursue their dream versus their own dream of their own and everything. So I've seen that it happen definitely in the college situations, but even some of the older adults as well. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts around that and how you have dealt with that, and if you even faced that yourselves, where somebody might be trying to get you to pursue a dream that wasn't necessarily your own passion or your own dream of your own.
I think it is kind of the story of life. I mean, there's always going to be people who are going to try to influence you and guide you, and it's a good thing to listen. But even now, I'm working on becoming even more authentic. I mean, probably another 20 years, I'll be saying the same thing, because it's an ongoing evolution of the soul, is to become more authentic, to be discovering more, the whole know thyself, and to thine own self be true. It doesn't seem to stop. Maybe some of the young ones are going to hit it a lot sooner, but I'm still on that pathway.
Yeah. What about your take on that, Sasha?
I think what's interesting for me in the startup world or small business world is that people are actually pursuing their dreams. I think they probably would have come from a time where they were pursuing somebody else's dream, and they're breaking free from that dream, right? And they're stepping into, an entrepreneurship. That's not to say that being in the same job for 18 years isn't going to make somebody feel like they've succeeded, because I have friends that have been in jobs for 18 plus years and they've thrived and they've become extremely successful. I think that stepping outside of that is just a different yellow brick road, shall we say, right? And a different kind of path in terms of pursuing what you want to pursue. I mean, I come from a Middle Eastern European background. And in the Middle East, you're either a doctor or a lawyer or you're in business, and then the European side is more flexible. And, it's the understanding of like, let your child blossom into what they're going to blossom into. Right. And I think I was miserable in my 9-to-5 for years and years and years. And I didn't know what I wanted to do until I found my own passion, and through many mentorships, through finding my foundation, through finding my root, and not my cultural root, but my root as a person in terms of, as I think, Patricia, you mentioned, or I forget who it was. I mean, or I think it was Emba, you mentioned we are here for only a short period of time. What difference are you going to make? And I think in entrepreneurship, if you're chasing after making X, it's not going to work. I think you have to chase after your passion in terms of delivering that difference, because whatever difference you're going to deliver is going to have an impact. And I think what's beautiful about the younger generation versus, I think maybe I'm the eldest of the millennial generation. And I think we graduated with, you graduate, you get a job. this younger generation is you graduate and you think about following and chasing a dream. And so their mindset is so much more entrepreneurial. So it is a little different on the startup and the small business side, because what is so exciting for me is the passion that they have to get their product or their service out in market, which a majority of is serving, or it is breaking through the gap in the market for people to have a better life, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines, and we got about another 15, 20 minutes to go in the show and everything. But one of the things I was curious about from you, Sasha, and it is a question I ask everybody at the end and everything, is this notion of knowledge and having that knowledge. And this is actually for both you and Charlie, but I know that a lot of people that are going into the entrepreneurial world, and Anwan may have some thoughts around this as well, they don't necessarily have certain skill sets that they need. I am oftentimes shocked at the amount of entrepreneurs that have no clue what a business plan is and don't have a business plan whatsoever, and don't really have some of the basic skills that you need even to start a business and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on that as folks that coach business owners, because sometimes that's one of the first questions that I will ask folks is, what is the mission statement? What is the business plan? And a lot of times they don't have an idea of what that will be, and all along those lines. And a flip side of that isn't just the business owners, but I have a dear friend of mine, and he has this great saying that he uses with entertainment promoters. And it's basically, because he used to be the rental manager at the Carolina Theater, which is one of our art house theaters here in Durham and everything. But his famous quote, and he still uses it to this day, even though he's not at that particular job, is everybody is a promoter till it's time to cut the check. Which means that they've all got great ideas, but they don't have the money and the resources to necessarily carry out the idea. So he would have them coming up with this, I want to bring X, Y, and Z to the Carolina Theater, and then he'd be asking them what the budget is, and they would have no idea what the budget is. And then he knew they didn't have a check to cut, so he probably weren't going to get that rental and everything. But Charlie, I'll start with you, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts as well, because a lot of times the basic skills are missing as well.
I think that's I think entrepreneurs, I think a lot of people jump off into entrepreneurship because I'm good at something, right? But I'm not necessarily good at business and understanding entrepreneurship and running a small business, and I think that's why you see so many, they talk about in entrepreneurship, a lot of times you have a lot of failures, right? And I believe that FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. Fail, right? You learn a lot from those things, but I think a lot of times people jump off into entrepreneurship because I'm good at something, but they need to understand too that there is a lot that you have to learn in it, and a lot of that comes from mentors, and a lot of it comes from business coaches as well. So, I would encourage them to jump off. What do you have to lose, right? But yeah, you've got to kind of have a tribe, right, to go along with you and help you in that.
Yeah. Anwan, what's your thoughts on that? And definitely Sasha as well, because like I said, sometimes actually a friend of mine, well, he's a friend of a friend, but he actually had some business ties to Dubai, and he even talked about people, I think he works for the New York Times, if I remember correctly, Bob does, and everything, but he would talk about folks that would be reaching out to him for business proposals and business ideas, but they didn't even have a proposal for them. They just had an idea, but didn't necessarily have a proposal to give them. So oftentimes those didn't go that far, and he actually had the resources to give them if they had a proposal and a plan in action. But I just wanted your thoughts around that.
We have a lot of passionately broke people in the business space. We have a lot of business owners that are volunteering in their own companies. And it is shocking statistics. And we have a lot of business owners that think their business is their retirement plan. And it doesn't all it all comes crumbling down when, you cannot sustain it any longer. Either the 9-to-5 cannot, fund the business any longer, or your savings cannot fund the business any longer, or your anchor client drops you for one reason or the other. Like, there's so many permutations of what can happen. And as Charlie say, being able to have that foundation, whether it's either from a mentor, from a business coach, or whatever, it's so important. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is, I'm passionate, I'm good about this, let's go out there. Yeah. Business doesn't work like that. And a lot of that is the employee mindset as well. You put your CV out there and, you get interviews. You put a product out there, people will not necessarily come. So it's understanding and having that in place. I've worked with or seen too many business owners that have this business, have been in business 6, 10 years. But then when you look at the back end, you wonder, how are you still doing this? Like, how come you've not burnt out? How are you making money? Why is this still like this? And being able to invest not only in yourself, but also in your business is very, very important. Looking at the data, I'm here, data equals money. I'm all about the bottom line. I love that you want to impact. I love that you want to change lives and everything. But as soon as you tell me you're a business owner, I am all about the bottom line. No matter what you are in, even if it's a charity, people don't like it, but charities are about the bottom line. If they're not raising funds, they cannot have an impact. It's just as simple as that. So being able to have those things in place, being able to see what it is that your numbers and your data are telling you, it's so vital for you to, stop the leaks, making mistakes that you could have avoided if you just spent, that extra 5 minutes looking at this wonderful product. Only 2 people have bought it, but I'm spending, I don't know, 10,000 on ads, stuff like that, where at the front end, it looks like it's all working because you have, this 20,000 launch, not realizing that actually I spent 50K to get this 20,000 launch. But it looked all beautiful because, all the pain. It's a bit like pregnancy, Charlie was saying earlier. You kind of forget all the pain and you're looking at this beautiful baby. And it's like, no, love, remember the pain. We don't want that again, at least from a business perspective. So very important. Love the passion, love that you want to do an impact, but being able to understand the story your numbers are telling you will allow you to accelerate a lot faster. And also it is sustainable, so they have the options to decide, when I'm 50, I'm going to retire, or when I'm 50, I'm going to bring 3 new people and I could, work 1 hour a week. When I'm 60, I'm going to sell the business. When I'm 70, I still want to be working one-on-one with clients. You have the options then to choose what it is that you want. And also you have the options to take care of life. Like when I'm working with clients and setting goals, I always say, give 10%, and add 10% plus or minus on both ends. 5% is because we're working with human beings, and human beings are just people for the best part. And then 5% is for life, because life doesn't care what it is that you have planned. It's going to do what it wants to do. So that 10% gives you that buffer to be able to maneuver a little bit, so that your business doesn't collapse because you're ill, you have to take care of kids, you have to take care of parents, you just need some time off to recuperate and all those things. So please look at your data. And if not, get some.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, Sasha, along those same lines and everything, I know that one of the things that is oftentimes fascinating, and I've got a number of friends that are in the creative space, is that they are trying to find a way to fund their business as well. Because I do know a number of people that are doing the gig economy, and sometimes that can be a conflict as well, because, you want to spend, and sometimes they say it takes almost 100 hours a day, even though we know there's not 100 hours in a day, but they say it takes a lot of time to create a business, but it also takes a lot of time to drive DoorDash and Grubhub and a number of those gig kind of economies as well. But sometimes because they have to put food on the table, they've got to feed a family, they've got to do a number of other things, they find that they have to have 2 masters, for lack of a better term. So I was wondering, as one that also does some business coaching, what your advice is to folks when they are telling you that, look, I want to have this business, I really want to devote my time to the business, but I've got to feed my family, and therefore I've got to go drive, Lyft, or I've got to do something that is a gig-oriented job in order to make sure that we've got some food on our table and everything.
Yeah, I love, Emma, what you said about the data, and I think that that's extremely important. Just to comment on that, and I mean that's essentially like what we do in marketing, and like I don't move the chessboard unless the data is telling me, and that's what I tell my clients. Like in the beginning, I think you can kind of, let's see where the wind is blowing, because you're so new, so you have to test and learn. And I think one of the enterprise companies that I worked for, it was all about like the testing and learning and being okay with failures and being okay with successes. And I think like what Charlie also said, as it relates to your authentic self, it's also knowing like who you are as a founder. and where your skills lie as a founder. And like founders typically are the big picture. They are the big ideas. And like one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, and one of the reasons why I'm writing my book, is to really distill down and to simplify what this maze is as it relates to marketing, and that it shouldn't be so convoluted because there is so much noise out there. You know, God bless technology and all of our social channels. It's kind of breaking down and getting back to the foundation. As it relates to, you know, stepping out, and I think Emba can, like, you know, be a testament to this. When I launched my business, I had 1 foot in my 9 to 5 and 1 foot out. And I think a lot of the times, you know, people might think, oh, I'm just going to cash out on my 401k and I'm going to hit the ground running. And that's not necessarily going to be the best bet. I think that, and I connect this to marketing, right? Because it's like feed your funnel and then invest back in, right? So if you step out, you cash out, you're going to feed your funnel to a certain degree, and then you're going to have nothing else to feed the funnel. And then you may wind back out to like a 9 to 5 again. So I think it's being able, again, to move those chessboards accordingly and to really pursue that. It's perseverance. We'll go back to that, you know, word of 2024, and it's really, you know, jumping on that. But I think taking deliberate and sort of safety measures to get to that point in time. But it goes back to knowing who you are as a founder and knowing what you can and cannot do, because as an individual, you may be able to launch your business, you may be able to put it in market, but who's going to help support, grow it? Who's going to help, you know, really push, really be the conductor to the symphony, if you will, for a lack of a better term, to support you to get there? Because again, founders are big ideas. They aren't necessarily business people, and they need to hire the right people to get there. I'm a conductor to the symphony. I don't know all things marketing. I hire people in those expertise, and I know how to move it around. And so it really just goes back to, you know, knowing yourself and knowing what you can and cannot do. And risks are great, but I think you need to, I think as Memba will agree, coming from a financial background, you need to weigh your checks and what is it? Checks and balances.
Yeah, checks and balances, no doubt about that and everything. Like I said, there's a question that I get to everybody, going to get to that very shortly. But the one thing that I was going to say to you, Sasha, is I can relate, because even though Pod TV is only about 3 years old, and it's only about 3 years of this being here on the history and all along those lines. But when I started Lee Entertainment, which is the other company that I do, which is a lot of entertainment consulting, the MCN, and a number of other jobs, I was literally working at GlaxoSmithKline after having worked at a newspaper job and everything in that space. And I definitely used the resources of that 9 to 5, whether that was the copier or whether that was the phone or a number of other things. So I did use the resources in order to launch the company, which has been around off and on for about over 20 years, probably closer to 30 and everything. But definitely it was having those resources through the job that I was able to have that didn't have them in my house at the time. I mean, I've got a copier now in my house, but at the time I didn't have one. And the phone, you know, you can use somebody else's phone, and sometimes you try to do that as well. So definitely it helped me launch the company and all along those lines. And it's definitely, like I said, we still do stuff on a semi-consistent basis, and definitely have done a number of our festivals and a number of other things using that title of that particular company and all along those lines, and even help with the Road to the Apollo using that particular one as well. I know we had a couple of folks that had to jump off, but one of the things I get everybody to do, and I try to find the information for Genevieve, and I'll see if the other person left their information as well and everything. But if not, I'll put it in the kind of like the posts, comments, and other thing that'll go on for this show, as we do reruns several times during the course of the week. But one of the things I get all my guests to do, and Michael knows this from having been on shows before and everything, is I am a big believer in messages of positivity. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation that we've had today, and hope that y'all have enjoyed it as well. So I get all of my guests, and I'll start with you, Anwan, and go to Sasha, Patricia, and Michael, and then close out with you, Patricia, and everything. But I'd love for people to tell how they can be reached, how they can be contacted, and any message of positivity and hope that they would like to share with our global audience, because Pod TV is seen globally in a multitude of countries. Depending on who you listen to, it's between 150 to 200 countries and all along those lines, but it's definitely heard in a multitude of places. And we do re-air it on the platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and a number of other places. And of course, Pod TV itself is on the Roku and Amazon Fire on a regular basis. So there'll be people who will be watching this during the course of the week, our conversation. I hope that y'all have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed having y'all on at another dinner party. And actually, in a little bit, finish my soup because that was an early dinner that I was having when I first brought y'all on. So it's now got to be warmed up, and that'll be my particular dinner for today and everything along those lines. But definitely, if you want to start on with any message of positivity and hope and how folks can reach you, and I do welcome all of you to come back on in a future edition as well, because I always have, as Michael can tell you, having folks come and make return trips as well. So definitely hope that you enjoyed it and hope that you'll make a return trip.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on here. One thing I want to say is there's no right way and there's no wrong way for you to do things. Ignore right or wrong. It's just more around what works best for you and also what makes you sleep at night. Okay. As Mark, you said, you need to pay your bills. So whatever it is that you need to do so that it's sustainable for you, do that. Because one quote that I love sharing with everybody is, don't let the limitations of your eyes limit your mind. For the longer you're not taking action, the more wealth you are losing. So, be expansive in what it is that you're thinking and be creative. The most important thing, and I'm going to say it selfishly, is you. So what works for you, what works for your family, what works for your sanity, and what works for your sleep. Okay, you can totally find me on LinkedIn and Minba, as you see on the screen, and definitely find me online as well at Wealthfluency. Any questions around your data or finance especially, do reach out. I'll be happy to help and answer any questions. Thanks again, Mark, and great meeting all of you, Patricia, Michael, Sasha, Genevieve, and Charlie that have left already.
Definitely appreciate that and everything. I said I'll go to Sasha next. So Sasha, if you'll tell folks how they can reach you and any message of positivity and hope that you would like to share as well.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for having us on. This has been great. It's been a nice organic kind of fit in terms of, the conversation, which, hearing what everybody was saying before I jumped on and kind of joining in. So I appreciate all of you. And, I look forward to connecting with all of you and maybe potentially, jumping on a one-to-one to learn more. My last remark in terms of positivity is, again, I'll bring back perseverance. You're always going to hit those roads, the bumps in the road. You're always going to continue to fly, and then you're going to have to continue to optimize along the way. And I think if you have to keep going, don't listen to the noise that's along the way that says, just take a minute and kind of move through things. Just keep going in terms of where you want to reach in your goal. But again, going back to what Mba said in terms of priorities. It's like there is no, as we come into this new year and everybody's like goals. It's like, there's no priorities. You're weaving it in. And I think Charlie was the one that said it. And you just have to have the priorities, the boundaries, knowing what feels right for you and really, pushing to reach that end goal. I can be reached at, my website is just Sasha Awa, so SACHA, last name AWWA.com. And I'll put my email here. And, I look forward to connecting with all of you and, potentially being back on the dinner, Mark. Thank you.
Sounds great and everything. Michael, it's you, and then it's Patricia. So Michael, any words of encouragement that you want to share and how people can reach you and everything? And definitely another great conversation with you as part of it, but I definitely love to hear your thoughts around positivity and any messages that you want to share about what you've got coming up.
Sure. Yeah. Mark, thank you again for having me on here for the online dinner party. A lot of fun, great guests, really great conversation. I guess the thing I would want to leave everybody with is this: the future is falling into your lap one moment at a time, and you can choose to do something with it. And if what your choice is to build a kinder world, to build that future that we want to live in, then look me up. I would definitely love to work with you because I think that is the future that we want to live in. I think that it's a kinder, more beautiful, more inclusive, more loving, more forgiving kind of future. Easiest way to find me is In-Kind Book. And you can also find my name right there, michaelgneese.com or inkindbook.com. And thank you once again for having me on.
Appreciate it and everything. Patricia, you want to share your words of encouragement, your final thoughts, and how you can be reached, and definitely any message of positivity and encouragement that you would like to give as well.
Well, I think for the first time in my life, I made a New Year's resolution I can keep. And that is to have a belly laugh every day. And I honestly believe that we need to always get back to that joy of life, that you can always find something that you can have a belly laugh with. And as far as hope for the future, I am meeting so many young ones, your age and up, all the way up, that just are motivated and passionate and persevering, everything, all the qualities that are demonstrated here today. So I'll never lose hope. As far as reaching me, I guess the best is info@amazingbooks.ca would be the best way to reach me. But thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot about business. Now that's something I need to learn right now. So thank you.
Glad to have the conversation. Glad you were able to learn a lot. We're going to go out with a group of folks actually from Oklahoma that are doing an education award, and they've been doing it for a while and everything. So this is an award that started back in, I believe it was about 4 or 5 years ago, but they just recently did an award at the end of last year. And I'm sure they'll be having one in 2024 as well, because they don't honor just the teachers, but they also honor the people behind the scenes, like the guidance counselors we alluded to earlier, as well as the janitors and a number of other people as well. So I'll probably go out with them and maybe one of the financial literacy people that has a financial company as well. But I've thoroughly enjoyed all of you that are on the call now, as well as the two that had to leave and everything, that being Genevieve and Charlene. But definitely hope to have all of you back on in the near future at another dinner party where we have these kind of enriching conversations on a regular basis every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So don't be surprised if you don't get another invitation to come to another dinner party in the not too distant future. And hopefully we can have these conversations to continue, and we can continue to learn from each other, everybody to learn from each other and to build a common bond and to build that tribe that I was talking about, and all in that kind of way. So don't be surprised if you don't get another invitation. But right now we're going to get on out of here with a couple of PSAs. And like I said, this one is about some people that are honoring the teachers of society. And I'll also put across, because I did see that she had put her information, Genevieve's information, and I'll see if I can't find Charlene's before I get on out of here so that folks can know how to reach them as well. But definitely had a fun and enriching conversation, and look forward to seeing you all back in the very near future.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Bye. Thanks.
I'm
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop, non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you. I thank you for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today. 804-349-8600. 804-349-8600.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown, if you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table, if you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference, I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.